The neon sign spelled out MODD brilliantly, like a bright green beacon, shimmering outward from the mountaintop upon which a ramshackle 3-story tall building precariously roosted, just at the peak of the clouds. The structure was a bent and splintery wooden thing, sagging towards the east as if it would plunge off the jagged mountainside at any moment. The bowing edges of the structure were supported by several 45-degree angled struts that had been haphazardly hammered and rehammered into place over the crumbling years. But this easily noticeable structural mishap waiting to happen was hardly a deterrent, as several flocks of airships and hovercraft continuously hovered around the high-rise rest stop, mooring and depositing pilots who came from all corners of the cloudy waste to eat, barter, trade, and maybe get into a negotiation or two. With a resounding crash, a green goblin was kicked out of the swinging doors of the MODD labeled bar in the sky. Before he could scamper to his feet, 4 primates in blue fatigues leaped out after him and clambered all over the squealing figure, pinning him to a slick wet rock with their odorous weight. "Drink 6 pints and refuse to pay, will you?" one ape howled. Another whooped. "Since when do goblins bum around without money in their pockets? What's this blown-up world coming to?"
Please,
the goblin stammered and struggled, his cold sweat reflecting the pale twilight above the mountainside.
I was just a passenger aboard the Diamond Dog sky tanker, the Cloudfang. They robbed me blind and ditched me here an hour ago. I didn't realize my money was gone until just a few seconds ago.
"You know what you are?" one of the primates hissed, grinning devilishly. "You are equestrian filth. And here at the Monkey a Dozen Den, we know just how to treat equestrian filth. The same way they always used to treat each other." Right on cue, a 5th monkey marched out of the doors of the den, wielding a red-hot branding iron in the shape of a horseshoe. "Hot off the grill! Where's the rum-guzzling punk, boys?" "Over here, brother." "Let's teach him a lesson he won't forget, or anyone else he meets, for that matter."
No, no!
The goblin paled and struggled to scamper away. The primates held him tighter, their whoops and hollers rising to a crescendo as their brothers zeroed in with the steaming hot metal.
"Please, don't do this to me. I'll never last a night in the wastelands if anybody sees me with—"
"Shut up and take what's coming to you, cheapskate." The monkey's eyes flickered red as he swooped low and swung the brand square into the exposed goblin's flank. Steam and burning skin kissed the air as the lowly creature howled in torment. The primates huddled around him, laughed victoriously, while several patrons hung out of the windows of the MODD, sipping their foam drinks and pointing amused fingers at the tortured brandy's plight. Once the horseshoe image was permanently fused to the goblin's smoking flesh, the 5 monkeys flung him like a sack of garbage into a splashing puddle on the far side of the mountain plateau. "Now go forth and gallop free, equestrian filth! Ha ha! Soon you'll be dead like the rest of the—" The monkey holding the brand stopped in mid-sentence, his mangy eyes dilating upon the sight of who was trotting past the dramatic scene. With the Harmony quietly moored to a lateral wooden strut of the MODD behind her, the last pony made her way towards the front steps of the building. She glanced boredly at the whimpering figure of the still steaming goblin while moving past him. As she coasted by the monkeys, however, she gave her saddlebags a little shake, rattling her brass rifle for good measure. Half of them gulped, the other half of them snickered, until the 5th raised his branding iron, threatening to smack the group into silence. Gradually, the 5 watched with quiet amusement as the Pegasus stepped past the gaze of the flanking patrons, and into the bright lantern light of the Monkey a Dozen Den interior. Inside, the air had a sour smell to it, like fermented juices laced with buzzing flies, running down the walls and into the splintery corners of the gas-lit hovel. Under the lantern-lace chandeliers made from retired and rusted propeller blades, several round tables rattled with the clamoring rum jugs of dozens upon dozens of slobbering, rain-faced pilots at rest. Diamond dogs, ogres, goblins, woolly rodents, and other hunched-backed leathernecks of post-apocalyptic quasi-sentience muttered and hissed and sneered and laughed at one another, filling the careening bar with the infinite sway of drunken bedlam. Deep beneath the lackadaisical bodies of many tipsy patrons, a fine cold mist had seeped in from the equestrian miasma beyond the walls, so that every other lost soul inside the place ever so briefly hung his eyes in a stupor that betrayed the alcoholic reverie of the moment. It was as if someone had arranged an orgy on top of a mountainous grave, and already half of the bacchanalia had succumbed to the endless dirge that would soon call them lurching back towards the merciless twilight outside. By the time the pony had trotted only halfway into the monkey o' dozen den, 3 fights had already broken out. One was between 2 diamond dogs in a far corner of the room. Another was between 2 goblins and a reptilian creature over a moth-eaten pouch of strips. As for the third, glue stick! A fisted paw slammed across the pony's face. She spat blood, briefly stumbled, then glared straight ahead of her. A mangy raccoon, a bum, with one metal right foreleg, and a body covered in sooted rags. He balanced on the edge of a table in front of the Pegasus, shuddering, nearly foaming at the mouth. With clattering teeth and eyes wide as bloodshot saucers, he seethed and roared. You! Filth! Glue stick! Back to the sun goddess's womb with glue stick! Filth! He snarled and swung a trembling paw at her again. She dodged this time, glaring at him as a series of chuckles rose in the air around the scene. Brow creasing, she faked walking away, instead pivoting at the last second to swing her flank roughly into him. The raccoon purposely took the whole brunt of the blow, bouncing over 2 rum-filled tables before slamming upside down into an iron stove that singed his fur. The half-sane varmint scrambled on the ground, fighting to put his tail out, before crawling pathetically towards a table full of battle-scarred ogres who laughed mightily at the scene, gave the pony several thumbs up, and proceeded to pay up the bum for living up to their dare. As the chuckles subsided, the raccoon thing drooled at the fresh strips of silver lying in his paws, hyperventilated joyfully, and scrambled on all fours towards the bar counter for a much-needed pint. Swishing the collected copper fluid in her mouth, the pony exhaled hard and resumed her beeline towards the far end of the den. She felt countless bodies eyeing her, murmuring strange and presumably malicious things under their breath as the last pony trotted past them, having once again graced the filthy interior of the forsaken sky bar. On a shelf behind the den's bar, a tight jar rested on the counter, inside which a spherical pastel-colored insect slept soundly. A gnarled leather hand suddenly lifted the bottle, shaking it and forcing the 4-winged creature to open its glistening eyes. Forlornly, the lone Paris sprite gazed upwards as the lid of the jar unscrewed and the gnarled hand stuck a spoon in and savagely poked its bright exoskeleton. "Come on, spit it up, will ya, little turd?" a voice raspily hissed, forming condensation on the jar. The Paris sprite wilted, shuddered, and retched, vomiting up a large globule of brown matter. Half a breath later, the brown shell of the cocoon shattered with a brand new Paris sprite joyfully emerging, wings aflutter. This nubile infant reveled as it was raised by the spoon and introduced to a bright toasty world outside the jar. "There we go, little one," the hoarse voice briefly chirped. Just then, a crunching noise, and the newborn insect's eyes crossed as the petite thing was skewered down its length of its body with a toothpick, which was promptly planted in the top of a bun of a toasted meat sandwich being slid across the bar counter towards the diamond dog. "There you go, Fido," grunted the gnarled bartender, a gray-haired baboon with a ratty tail and a spreading bald spot. "Try not to choke on it."
Delish, delish.
The canine drooled and raised the sandwich for the first bite. He hesitated at the last second and glared the primate's way with an arched eyebrow.
Hey, just what kind of meat is this anyways?
"It's nobody you know," the baboon throated, his red nose crest flaring. As the diamond dog proceeded to chomp away at the sloppy meal, the owner of the monkey o' dozen den returned to polishing rum mugs and swatting random flies that landed on the shelves of the exposed foodstuffs. A petite shadow hoisted itself up to the counter. Without looking, the baboon sniffed the air and giftedly ugly nose and smirked into the bottom of a mug. "I'm afraid we're fresh out of daisies, Harmony, though I could fill a trough out back with distilled bat sweat. I've heard a few goblins tell me it tastes almost like equestrian apple cider did. Before the goblins keeled over and died, that is." "We've been over this, Pit," the pony grumbled. "Harmony is the name of—" "Your ship, I know, by the gods." The mangy primate rolled his sickly eyes and spat into a mug before wiping it clean. "You're a galloping golden goose, and yet you keep your call sign anonymous. I swear that Zeppelin is the only interesting thing about you. Which is a crime, don't you think?" "Humph," I would have reckoned the last pony on the planet would be a heavy drinker, but alas, ye surprised me there. He put the mug up, hung the rag over his shoulder, and leaned against the bar towards her, a smirk. Well, glue stick, if it isn't daisy sandwiches you've come here for, then what? At his pointed address, she glanced over her shoulder at the voraciously drinking raccoon several tables behind. She tongued her freshly bruised cheek from the inside. I never ask for the trouble this den brings to the table each time I come here. The trouble just comes to me. All I've ever wanted was to do business. Old Brucey sent you again, did he? The aptly named Pitt smiled a row of yellow teeth. He's a sucker for the charity cases. That bushy-tailed numb-tongued fruitcake. Ha ha! He blinked sunkenly at the glare she was giving him. Not that you deserve pity. You'd rather be paid in strips, I'm guessing. Running low on them, as well as on luck. She sighed, leaning sideways against the bar so that her sheathed rifle was furthest from the rest of the interior. She eyed every guzzling patron one at a time, keeping an instinctual air of caution since the very moment she strolled in through the swinging doors of the den. Bruce sold me a few things I needed, but perhaps the best thing he gave me was a tip. Or at least he suggested you may have a tip. Keep saying the word tip and I'm liable to eat my tail in frustration. Pitt chuckled, grabbing a customer's empty mug and refilling it. You know, you've never taken me up on my offer to start your own tab. I don't drink, she grunted. Why not? The world's miserable. He winked at a droopy-eyed drunkard as he slid him a tall refill. Granted, it's always been miserable. Only now it's miserable and in ashes. That's a good combination for getting some joy juice down your gullet if I ever heard one. Pitt. She raised her goggles and gazed coldly at him with twin scarlet marbles. A good third of your patrons are so drunk off their butts that they crash into the rocks the first second they undock their dirigibles from your little joy juice stand. His red-crested nostrils flared indignantly. That's an unfounded and seditious lie. She gestured blindly with a hoof towards the den's rattling floorboards. There's a pile of 24 burn-out Zeppelins at the base of this mountain alone. He shrugged. So, what better way to attract customers than to give them something to loot before dropping by? She groaned, face-hoofing briefly. This is when I wonder why I'm the one who's endangered. That's just luck of the draw for you, Miss Temperance. He smiled, leaning over once more and whispering in a private voice between the two. Lots of punks here. They read a little too much into that crud, if you ask me. What crud? Karma crud, he whispered. Some of them think that Equestria bought it because your kind bought it. He chuckled, walking his gnarled monkey fingers across the bar counter in a soccer kicking dead flies one after another. Now, I'm not the sort of baboon to suggest that ponies were in fact responsible for the mayhem that befell us all. Heck, if it was, I sure ain't complaining. When Pegasi, unicorns, and the more boring horses fell off the face of the earth, my kind got the upper hand on the branch. Granted, we've always bred like monkeys, but this was a new frontier. I don't put much thought into who or what is to blame for all this. But if it wasn't for my fate, my 11 younger brothers and I wouldn't possess the booming enterprise we have today. She glared at him. I'm glad, Pitt, that the utter extinction of my flesh and blood has paved the way for you to poison the deranged pilots to their death from your festering waterhole in the sky. See? He clapped his hairy palms, grinning yellowishly. Even when you try to be angry, you sound like loose change at the bottom of a well. Why not just crucify yourself to the bow of your ship and make poetry of your dull-as-nails life already? She smiled icily. I couldn't give you the satisfaction. I kid you, Pony, I kid, Pitt murmured. With a wink, he planted a gnarled hand over his heart. You should know by now that I'm a good monkey underneath all this surly fur. Just then the lights overhead dimmed and flickered. Several patrons mumbled and growled their complaints. Cursing, Pitt pounded the bar with his fist. Why, that unsufferable, useless limb! He turned and took 3 bold steps towards the door, flung it open, and shouted into the steamy corridor beyond. Willis! Psst! Willis! What gives you, melon fudge? Inside the smoking, claustrophobic room, a frighteningly emaciated chimpanzee was pumping his limbs on a rickety bicycle rigged in place to an elaborate gear system that powered several pumps aimed at a triad of boilers. He sweated and strained and stammered through a permanently red face. "I'm so sorry, brother. It's the third time today that I nearly passed out. Can I please have some water now?" "The only water you should care for is the type you make the moment I beat you within an inch of your life, you good-for-nothing sissy. Pedal faster, or you don't eat tonight." "No, Pit, please. Brother, don't leave me alone here for another minute." The baboon slammed the door shut, dusted his hands off, and grabbed a glass on the way back towards the bar across from the pony. "I swear, I only keep 'em alive 'cause the monkey o' 11 din doesn't roll off the tongue as well." Clearing his throat, he polished the glass and smirked the Pegasus's way. "So, enough monkey talk. Business?" "Green flame," she murmured. Pitt dropped the glass, shattering it. He sweated nervously under the brief gaze of a few half-curious patrons, and swiftly leaned over the counter to whisper back at the mayor. Who told you, and wonder what kind of duress?" "Old Brucey," she said, "and he told me to come seek you without asking for anything in return. Sucker for charity, remember?" "Obviously." "So, is it true?" "Is what true?" Her brow furrowed. "Is there actually any green flame in the wastes?" She motioned towards the thickly populated bar behind her. "Every creature that has enough intelligence to speak swaggers through your den at some time or another. If anyone would have heard word about green flame, it'd have to be you." "Perhaps that's true. But you know as well as I do, Pony, that rumors stay rumors until one pilot actually has the coconuts to scrounge up something concrete. Until then, it stays in the bag." "Well, I'm here," she said, staring at him fixedly. "Mix and pour." He squinted at her, gradually bearing a liquid smirk. His red nose crest flared momentarily as he throated. "You're really not afraid of anything, are you, Pony? I wonder if that makes you desperate, or if that just makes you stupid." "I'm hoping it will make me rich." She reached back into her saddlebag, produced an empty glass jar, and rotated until the dull ruined cap faced the leaning primate. "You know how I do things, Pitt. I find elements and essences of things, I capture them, then I seal them in something like this. Everything I transport is protected by runestones, unbreakable, save for the sound of a word that only I have mastered uttering. You remember, of course, the time I extracted orange flame from the hydrofossils of the Froggy Bottom Bog? That burning energy has been the sole source of the Iron Goblin Brothers shipping barge for the last 5 years and running." "You don't need to convince me of your professionalism, sweetheart," Pitt muttered. "I have full faith that you could put a cork over a floating fart of green flame," he said, and then hesitated. "If you wanted to." She raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean, if I wanted to?" He raised a finger, smirking. "Here, I'll show you." That uttered, the baboon sashayed back to the far side of the back counter and rummaged through a wooden trunk full of cloth maps and leather atlases. The Pegasus sighed, slumped against the counter. She was only vaguely aware of a swaggering shadow scraping its obese way towards her side until a breath full of rum finally wheezed into her nostrils, slurring. "Well, if it isn't the last manure factory in Equestria, you've got some nerve, prancing around your frilly flank around these pots." Bored, she gazed over at what turned out to be a rotund ogre with a mixture of alcohol, slobber, and dried-up vomit lacing his double chins. He gazed dizzily at her with a half-practiced sneer before planting a jar on the counter and snapping his fingers at a passing monkey. "Double vodka! Keep it coming!" Struggling to stay standing in one place, he balanced himself through the act of whipping out a cigar from his moldy pants pocket and lighting it smokily in her face. He hissed smokily in the pony's direction. "Did ya hear me, equestrian filth? Or is there too much magic clogged up between your ears?" He retched and barely contained the energy to take a puff of his cigar. The pony glanced coolly from him toward his table of stupidly drunk buddies laughing and swaying in the distance. The raccoon bum was lying still and plastered between them as they made lewd gestures her way. and goaded on their fat buddy's intoxicated ramblings. She glanced stonily back at the fat creature who was presently belching smoke rings. "Can I help you?" "Sure you can," he leered, teetered, all the while pointing with a flick of his cigar. "You can start by telling me how the ponies got off hogging the sun and moon all to themselves for thousands of years, and then taking it all away like a flash, like it was garbage." He spat the nicotine loogie into the floor and waited on her reply with bloodshot eyes. "Look," she sighed, "I'm just here to do business with Pitt. If you have a problem with me, take it to him, 'cause I'm sure he'd be as angry as I am at the random oaf who was too wasted to smell his own pee bothered to interrupt a lucrative deal in the making." "Angry? You think you're angry?" "I didn't say." "Before everything blew up across the world, I was a respected citizen of Mount Ogerton," the obese cretin slobbered. A marmoset waiter flew by, dropping the requested glass of vodka down onto the bar counter beneath him. He half-pawed it while poking the cigar in the pony's personal space. "And then you magical frou-frou horses just up and drop the ball. "I don't have time for this," she muttered into an exhausted hoof. "Why was that, huh?" In belated timing, Pitt returned with a leather map in his gnarled hands. "Here we go. Just have a look then, shall we?" "Hey, Pitt," the drunk ogre slared at him. "I was talking to this hoofed freak." "Can't you see we're in the middle of something? Try preaching to your mug, Bright Eyes." The den owner spread the map out before the Pegasus, displaying a broad series of brown hash marks, and not so artistically represented the crumbled state of modern Equestria. He murmured, "Okay, so here's the word. A total of 5 groups of pilots showed up over the past week, claiming to have seen puffs of green flame." His gnarled finger drew invisible lines across the center of the leather map. "They're all flying identical routes at low altitudes. Most of my patrons, of course, aren't brave enough to scavenge deep into the heart of equestrian waste like you, Pony. But some of them can't resist a good flyby if they could chance upon something profitable. Mostly natural gas reserves and the like." "Can you get to the point, Pitt? I think I'm suddenly in a hurry," she said, shiftily casting a side glance towards the smoking ogre who hovered 2 spits away. "Right. All 5 groups gave me nearly identical coordinates for the green flame sighting. They described the sensation as bright plumes of emerald, large enough to see from half a kilometer. Pretty brilliant stuff, if you ask me. I think they were too frightened to check it out. But then again, none of them all were proficient in runestones." "What are runestones?" The ogre half-heartedly gripped his tall glass of vodka. "More pony hocus pocus?" The Pegasus rolled her eyes and leaned forward. "Just tell me the coordinates already." Pitt stared steadily at her, closely studying her expression as his blistered tongue dripped forth the numbers. 105, 32, 10. The pony's face paled. She stared anxiously at the leather map as if it had suddenly transformed into a viper ready to leap at her snout. She scooted back from the counter, cleared her throat, and in a shaky voice uttered, "You're right. No deal. I'm not going." "But Hominy," Pitt hissed, suddenly desperate. "Green flame." "I don't care," she snarled back. "I said I'm not going to do it, and I'm not going to do it." "Ooh," the ogre slobbered, grinning mockingly. "Tough filly." "Yo, can it, sardine breath." Pitt briefly frowned at him and spun back the pony's way in a desperate bid to salvage the deal. "Girl, there are clients who would pay out the butt for this stuff. I would pay out the butt for green flame, and that's coming from a red butt. The exact kind of butt honest deals are made of." "Save it." "With green flame, my brothers and I could raise this business to new heights. Why, we could magically teleport goods across kilometers. We could banish thugs and harpy pirates with a flick of the wand. He smiled at the yellow smile and rubbed his fingers together. You're just what we need, Pony Girl. How does 900 strips sound? No. 1100 bars. I'm desperate here. I am never, ever going to those coordinates, she seethed, her scarlet eyes burning like hot coals. Not for green flame, red flame, yellow flame, your mother's flame, or anything else for that matter. Isn't it just like your other jobs? No, it's not. Why not? Because some things are still sacred in this world, she shouted suddenly, shaking the air around their half of the bar and causing the patrons' heads to turn. I can't expect a money-grubbing, brother-slapping, venom-blooded simian like you to understand that. Or any of these soulless vermin you call customers, for that matter. Live and learn, sweet flanks, Pitt chuckled helplessly, shrugging towards the map. That's the kind of world we live in. Well, maybe it shouldn't be, she roared. At the crest of her echoing voice was a sudden dip in the silence, permeated briefly by a random cough or two from the rear of the bar. She exhaled, fuming, glancing shakily at all the glaring eyes that were suddenly plastered on her figure. The ogre chuckled briefly. He took a puff of his cigar and breathed offensively into her snout. Should have thought really hard about how much you love your world before you trashed it, huh, equestrian filth? Lay off, bucko, Pitt defeatedly groaned. Why should I? The ogre breathed into her again. She's the reason for all this mess. It's all her kind's fault. Why, if she had any real respect for the world, she'd just hang herself right here and now. She thinned her eyes through the waves of the ogre's cigar smoke. An artery pulsed at the edge of her cabin goggles. A hissing voice bubbled up through her lips. Do you know how much I hate smoking? The ogre smirked drunkenly back at his distant companions and then sputtered her way. No, why don't you tell me? She smiled. Gladly. With one hard swat, she slammed her hoof into the ogre's blubbery backside. The fat patron instantly spat the lit cigar straight into his glass of vodka. Flames burst out from the alcoholic beverage, which the pony viciously flung straight into the ogre's girth, dousing his torso in burning quaff. The ogre howled, twirled, and tossed his limbs as the flame covering him from head to toe. With a silent sneer, the last pony pivoted her hindquarters, reared her hooves, and bucked him burningly across the bar. The patrons gasped and dashed out of their seats as the ogre's hulking, flaming body sailed across the monkey-o'-dozen din and landed hard through a splintering table of wooden mugs. The singed drunkard's companions and a dozen other angry pilots jumped up to their feet with a flurry of various blades and knives kissing the din's air. In one savage line, they marched forward to converge on the pony. Eyes aflame, the furious mare flung her rifle free of its sheath. Against Pitt's panicked protest, she slapped it full of glowing runestones and cocked the copper barrel ceilingward as she snarled at the entire room. What of it? Before anything exploded, the double doors flew wide with a flurry of white snow and feathers. Golden beaks, glinting goggles, and razor-sharp talons lit the room, followed by a cackling voice. Whoa! What's all the commotion about? Is there some kind of trouble in my favorite watering hole? Huh? Pitt, what gives? Pitt, sweating bullets, gave the pony a sideways glance before murmuring under his breath. Trouble always follows you, eh? Clearing his throat, he leaped over the bar and spread his monkey arms wide with a voice of forced cheerfulness. Well, if it isn't the Golden Gang, my favorite customers ever. Whoop! He wheezed as he was forced into a half Nelson in one of the griffin's feathery grasps. Why, we're all one big happy family today, aren't we? Abso-positive-olutely, Pitt, pal. 'Cause if we weren't a happy family, I might just have to clean shop. You wouldn't like me doing that, would ya? I mean, it's your shop, after all. I would certainly hope so. Oh, and my brothers too. The smart ones at least. Right, like I said, it's your shop. Everyone calm down, take it easy. The head griffin ruffled the hair around Pitt's bald spot and grinned at the group as she waved her majestic wings and sauntered across the hazy interior on all fours. It's been a long and crazy week of navigating the wastelands. Take a chill pill and enjoy your drinks. The Golden Gang's here to party like it's the Third Age all over again. Don't stop the rum, barkeep. By this time, the pony had retracted her rifle, sheathed it, and slumped herself lethargically back against the bar. The angry fire in her eyes had long sizzled out. She watched with a forlorn breath as the burnt and wincing ogre struggled to get up. His friends lifted their buddy from the pile of sparking splinters, leading him, limping, towards the den's half-hearted excuse for a lavatory. They glanced back over their thick shoulders and frowned at the Pegasus, muttering a crazy assortment of obscenities her way. The other patrons were likewise glaring at her, but under the sudden beaks of the Golden Gang, they reluctantly returned to their tables. A long breath escaped the mayor's lips. She glanced down at the bar counter, at the leather map that Pitt had rolled out. There was still a scratchy impression in the dead center of the illustrated brown waste from where the baboon had excitedly marked out the infamous coordinates of the green flame. A crown of feathers blocked the image of the map. Looking up, the pony found herself staring into the grinning beak of a tall, muscular griffin. Like her 6 other companions, the half-Avarian creature sported a leather-brown bomber jacket splayed over with the totems of her fallen enemies, bounties that she and her loyal gang of feathered kin had expertly chased down. Nobody dared to question their skill or their tactful mercilessness. They were the esteemed bounty hunters of the equestrian race, the mavericks of the twilight. They were the Golden Gang. And this towering figure lurching in front of the pony with a swagger and a grin was the squadron's self-appointed leader. Well, 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 she chuckled, a pair of silver goggles glinting in the lantern light. If you ain't the last pony on earth, why is it that I'm always stumbling in on you when you're about to have your head ripped off by all things that live and breathe? The pony exhaled hard, suddenly staring at the floor as she muttered, Then maybe you shouldn't bother with stumbling, Gelda.